Hello everybody, welcome to WhatCulture Gaming. I'm Scott and I've been playing the Medium for about a week or so. Luckily enough, I had access to it for the last few days from the brilliant Bloober Team, who you might know from Layers of Fear, from Blair Witch, from Observer. They're one of my favorite sort of indie makes it big style studios that have been going for a while, but I feel like they really came on the map with Layers of Fear, and I absolutely love Observer as well. Now the Medium is a throwback survival horror to like a 90s style isometric, it doesn't have tank controls, but it's old school Resident Evil, old school Silent Hill style gameplay where you're really walking around environments, kind of combing them for specific points to interact with. You know, go find this valve because this specific thing, you know, this power conduit thing has run out of juice and you need to go put the generator on to get through the next gate. It's one of them. And while I think that holds it back from being a full-on 5-star, oh my god, it's incredible style release, I absolutely loved it. I think there's a lot to champion here. And you know, Bloober got out there, I'd sort of looked up a bunch of interviews after I finished it, and they were saying like, look, this was our most ambitious project, one of our most personal stories that we wanted to tell. And you can really tell, you know, you can really feel that retrospectively in my case, because I just went in pretty much blind. The only thing that I knew going in was that it had the sort of unique idea of rendering two worlds simultaneously. You play as Marianne, who's the titular medium herself, and she can communicate with the dead, with different spirits, or communicate with this other world. And the way that that's manifested in game is that you get to see what she looks like in the real world alongside what her sort of demon self, her other self, is doing in the other world simultaneously. It's a really cool visual trick, and it happens at random points during the story. Points where, you know, some sort of character in the other world might need to talk to you, and all of a sudden Marianne will grab her head and the screen will split, and then you just continue watching the cutscene in both perspectives. It does some really cool things gameplay-wise with this too, where you're kind of scouring the same environment in two different realities at the same time. Maybe realizing that if you flick to your other form, doesn't really have a name, this other world, but flick to this other form, maybe you can go through a door that is blocked in the real world, but is, you know, has some sort of energy path that you can go through as your other self. They do some cool little puzzle things with this, even though, like I say, the vast majority of what you're doing is walking around, scouring the environment, pick up a certain thing to use in a very specific place, and then go forward. I think a lot of that is because the main focus here is the story and the visuals. First up, for visuals, absolutely gorgeous. I don't know if you're anything like me, but you've kind of been waiting for things that are only available on the next generation of systems. And the Medium is the first Xbox Series exclusive. It is available on PC as well, but in terms of console exclusivity, it's only available on Xbox Series X and Series S. I played on Series X. I'm lucky enough to have a Series X. And like full disclosure, I played on the LG CX, the big, crazy, expensive TV, which I just threw a lot of money at one point last year because I was like, it's 2020 energy. I want this thing. And so it's worth throwing up there that in terms of the Series X and what it can upscale, it was outputting, according to my TV's display, the FreeSync information was 4K, 120 FPS. Maybe that's a thing across the board, but I was quite surprised by that. Like 120 frames a second is something I was associating with Doom Eternal or, you know, Rocket League on Series X. But yeah, game looks absolutely gorgeous, performs very well. But in terms of just general environment detail, it's stunning. I mean, Bloober Team have done, you know, Blair Witch before, and they've done obviously like, you know, intricate interiors in Observer. There's a deluxe version of Observer where they went back and sort of redid a lot of those interiors, a lot of that, you know, environment detail, make it feel like someone lived in these spaces. And all that stuff comes together in the Medium. I absolutely love looking at this game, and I think that it's totally recommendable as a holy hell, this is what next gen can look like style game. If you've been waiting for something to show off what your series systems can do, it's entirely this. So there's that side of it. The other thing, which is absolutely the reason that you should play this, is the story. I do think that, it's worth pointing out that it's quite short, which doesn't bother me. It came in at about 6 to 7 hours. They were touting, as I found in some interviews post-finishing, that it would be about 8 to 10-ish hours. And they've kind of made that their signature thing. You can get through Observer, Layers of Fear, Blair Witch in around about the same time, and personally I quite like that. I like a nice tight sort of video game story that knows exactly what it's trying to give you within a considered amount of time, with a certain set of gameplay mechanics that you don't get sick of because it's all focused together. It's very tight, it's very deliberate, and I champion that. I think that's a positive. But yeah, it's the story, and I'm not going to spoil anything at all, but I will say that this game is not what I thought it was based on those very small teasers that I'd saw. And I've gone back and watched a couple of other teasers and trailers, and there's a brilliant shift here about the halfway mark where it completely switches what you think it is, especially because a lot of us thought that this would be a sort of Silent Hill channeling game, something where, you know, you go into the demon world or whatever it is, and you figure something out there, and that's kind of it, right? That's sort of your concept done. You know, learn how to come back from the demon world or whatever. There's way more going on here, and I think that they delve into this idea of psyches and humans and having, you know, duality for each person. And maybe someone did something horrific, and there is some very, very dark subject matter in here. But also, let's explain how someone could be like that and why they would do that, and let's sort of let's visualize that by, you know, showing that if someone goes into this other world, then maybe they look differently when they're in that space, and maybe, you know, certain thought processes or what they've done in the real world can conjure different things in this other space. Honestly, one of the most enjoyable parts of this was not knowing where it was going, especially after that sort of halfway twist. It's brilliant. It definitely sparks a lot of conversations. I like the subject matter overall in terms of being able to even approach this in a video game. But if we roll all that back together, you've got the visuals, you've got this really great story. Marianne herself as a character is brilliant. She sort of plays, it's told retrospectively, where she's sitting at a table telling somebody about what she's been through, and then you sort of play that back, you know, realizing that she's telling a certain story about how she eventually got to this point, and then you kind of go forward from there. So all those things are very positive, but I think if you're holding it up as a modern horror, then it's a little bit too bolted to that old school framework to a fault, to a point where the vast majority of this, if you're not here for old school, nostalgic, throwback, third-person isometric survival horror, then you will bounce off this, because 90% of the time, if you're not in a cutscene, you are scouring environments, looking for points to interact with, just wanting to get to the next cutscene. It's worth pointing out, it's worth throwing in here to address the combat side of it, because I'm making a lot of comparisons to old school Resident Evil, old school Silent Hill, and old school survival horror. There is very, very, very little combat in this whole game. Now, you do get a couple of powers when you're in the other world, a shield and a charge burst, but you barely use them. It doesn't matter to me. I'm not saying that this is an all-out negative, but don't go in expecting the combat side of the genre as it was represented in the late 90s to come through here. As I'll get into, it's all about the story and the visuals. But I think it's worth pointing out. The other thing combat-wise is that this game does have the most outdated version of stealth that, you know, I thought was gone when we had it in Spider-Man, the MJ stealth sections, the archetypal, you know, slow crawl, walk through a place while there's a certain entity looking for you, and if they find you, instant death. If you have enough of the energy stuff stored, you can get one get out of jail free card thing where you throw the thing off you and get to keep going. But in terms of the setup, it is old school stealth 101. And when it happened, or when it started, I was just like, well, I don't have any nostalgia for this. This is one of the things that you guys could have left behind. Thankfully, that, like, the combat overall is barely in here. It makes up like a 10th of the whole product, but it's worth addressing. If that sort of stuff makes you run for the hills, then you'll kind of just have to grit your teeth and get through it. Thankfully, it does, like I said, it doesn't take up much of the overall game, but also the sequences themselves are easy enough to get through. And if we roll all that together into, does this work as a new age horror? It's not especially that scary. It's more, there's a couple of really cool jump scares that are cool in as much as you don't expect them, and they're really effective. But the vast majority is just a general unsettling sort of mentality, a general sort of unsettling headspace. Like, look at this place that you're investigating, this hotel, this resort that you're investigating, and what does that look like in the demon space? But I don't think it necessarily roots you to the spot like something like Visage does, where Visage is just it's an oppressive feeling of, oh my god, I don't even want to go around the next corner because there'll be something there. Whereas because the medium is so old school and it sort of plays into those tropes of, I need to go find the juice to turn the generator on, I need to go find the valve to turn the water off or whatever, then it can be a little bit too arcadey and it can be a little bit too basic in spots. That stuff can pile up to become an overt negative, which is the only real negative that I have, because personally I have a lot of love for those old school survival horrors, so it didn't really drag it down too much for me. The reason I'm not delving into story stuff too much is because I think one of the best things about this is the way that it plays its hand. Like I mentioned, the whole idea of the twist around about the midpoint, where you realize there's way more thematically that they're going to delve into than just this sort of fairly basic survival horror that you would think from the way that it plays. That's one of the best cards that it has to play. This is easily, for me, it totally lives up to everything that Bloober themselves were saying, that it is this incredibly ambitious game. It is their most worked on game with so much to say, with so much packed in there. Personally, I would have liked the story to land with a little bit more punch. It's sort of, they want you to continue the conversations that they're broaching, let's say, without necessarily wrapping it up with too tight a bow that I think I would have liked, because there's a lot of confidence beforehand until by the time you hit credits and it's like, oh, okay, I guess... cool, that was enough of the story, enough of the conversation, enough of the talking points that you wanted to do. Whereas, like, personally, I would have rather they stamped something on that to say exactly what their thoughts were on those things, and to keep it as vague as hell. But like I said, as a huge fan of Bloober and everything that they've been doing, you can see such a progression from Layers of Fear to Observer to Blair Witch, to then do this. I love that they're challenging themselves so much. You had Rutger Hauer's cyberpunk story with Observer. You had all the cool environmental stuff that they did in Layers of Fear, and you had this, just getting the Blair Witch IP to do something with that, which was had a really cool twist at the end of it too. They just seem like a really awesome dev that want to give you fun moments and memorable moments, and a mix of throwback gameplay with a really cool story and really cool twists and things like that. Yeah, overall, I'm gonna go with a 4-star rating. I think that the throwback stuff, I kind of wish they did a little bit more with it, and it kind of bogs itself down towards the end, to the degree where once the story has kicked off so much and you're just stuck turning generators back on and trying to reflow some water pools from different places to open up an exit, stuff like that, it gets in the way. I think that they could have streamlined those things towards the end, and it would have gone alongside the thematics of Marianne figuring out exactly what's going on. So I think I'm going 4-star. I think that it's still highly recommendable. It's on Game Pass. It's quite short, like I said, 6 to 7 hours, but just a highly recommendable survival horror with a really cool story, a really cool concept, and a really cool set of characters. So yeah, that's what I thought of the medium. I was thoroughly impressed by it, and I would totally recommend it to you as well. Let me know down in the comments if you were thinking about getting it, or by the time, if you watch this after you've played it, what did you think of the game overall? For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com, and I'll catch you soon.